Brent here with Bring Your Own Tools. On today's episode, if you want to learn how to change your old, dreary, sad tile from this to this, we'll keep on watching. Let's get started. Now this is video 2 of 2, so if you haven't watched the first and you'd like to do so, I will be leaving a link in the description box below on where to find that video. Now the first video went through the entire process of actually demoing out all the old tile, as well as the plumbing, as well as install the hardiebacker, and of course in the end, applying the red guard. Now after you let the red guard set, I then grab my aluminum trim tile and install it on the sides. Now this is very standard aluminum trim that you'd find at any Home Depot or general construction supply store. The trick is that there is multiple ways of actually installing it. My favorite is actually using a high contact adhesive spray. I spray it to the back of the trim as well as the wall, and as a general side note, try not to spray, right on the front edge of the trim. That was just kind of stupid. But once it's dry and set, go ahead and press the back of the trim against the wall that you actually applied the adhesive already, and it almost makes a permanent bond right then and there. It's very strong hold, as well as you don't have to worry about any fasteners or silicone, which is always nice. And now comes time for the fun part. Actual tiling. Now the nice thing about this project is that we are using large scale tiles, which are 12 inches by 24 inches, which just makes the process a little bit faster to install versus, small subway tile, and I've definitely installed plenty of both, so I do know there's a time difference. Now I've had this Ryobi stand-up tile cutter for almost 5 years, and it has worked on a number of different projects, so I highly suggest something like this if you're able to afford it. It's especially good at cutting large-scale tiles because it has a tray where you can actually push the tile in, and as you can see, it does a masterful job. And I always suggest applying a bit of blue painter's tape to the piece you're going to be keeping. One, because it gives you a permanent clean line that you can follow all the way down, and potentially the water from the tile cutter will actually remove it. And two, I find it generally gives you a better, cleaner cut along the edge. Now as for the thin set, I'm using Pro Light with a 1/4 inch trowel, and you mix it up just like I did with the speed set in the previous video. And just like most of my tile projects, I like to incorporate some type of accent tile, which is why I am using this mosaic interlocking tile, which I am cutting into 4 strips per each panel. Now there's a number of different spacers that you can use, and in general most of them do the exact same thing, but in this project I actually incorporated a very unique shim system that I have not tried until recently, and it is the Rigid Level Max Anti-Lippage and Spacing System. Now it's a pretty unique and ingenious system because you actually place the shim on the back side, then you use the orange mount and mechanically fasten and screw it down. Therefore it pushes against the back of the tile and makes a perfect flush panel between tile to tile. Now we're going to be mitering the corners around the shower box, and the best tool that I generally like to use is a grinder with a metal cutting disc. I'm using a graph cutting disc that I picked up on Amazon, and I'll leave a link in the description box below on where to actually purchase one. I mark a 45-degree angle on my speed square, cut it, might have to sand it off just a bit just to make sure you have a nice clean edge, then bring it back and hopefully it fits. Now in this case, because there is some slight adjustments that I need to make, I'm actually setting these in with my thin set first prior to installing everything else. This way I can maneuver the trim as need be, especially when I start installing all the tile on the inside. Now the most important piece to install correctly in this shower box is the bottom piece. And why is that? Because we need to make sure it's at the proper degree of levelness. Now this is not perfectly level, because if it was perfectly level, then moisture potentially might seep through and behind the tile. Now we want the back end angled up and the front edge angled down, so therefore if any moisture gets back there, it's going to be sliding into the tub towards you, not away from you into the wall. Now once you have your measurements, you can take the height and the width and then transfer that to your mosaic tile. Now you don't have to do this with the mosaic tile, you can always use the other larger tile, but I always generally like to give the shower box a bit of a pop, and what better to give a good pop than some beautiful mosaic tile. I carefully mud the back side of the tile as well as trying to snugly fit it in place. Now you don't want to have too much thinset, especially in this case because you're going to be cleaning up plenty of it later, but making sure you have proper coverage is obviously very important. Now one thing to note, especially on all these pieces in the box, is that you should have some type of spacer at the bottom of the mosaic tile in the back as well as on the side tiles. You want some type of space there because in order to make sure it's sealed correctly is that you have an area to seal. Now later on I'll be applying some silicone grout that matches the other grout that I'll be using. Just one more way that we make sure that we don't have any type of water intrusion over time. Because no one likes black mold. Trust me, I've dealt with it. Now once you have everything set, looking crisp and perfect, I then take a nice little clean sponge and clean off all the trim as well as the tile. Because let's be honest, excess thinset is a lot easier to remove when it's wet versus when it's dry. And I always like to use a 6-in-1 tool like this just to get into all those little nitty-gritty areas, which might take a little bit longer to do if it's just your finger. Now for the real challenging tile piece. Now this is, in all honesty, one of the hardest tiles I've ever had to cut, and it's my own darn fault for doing so. I actually accounted for the height incorrectly because I was accounting for the fact that those large tiles were 12 inches with a 1/16 of an inch grout line. The tile itself, in all honesty, is 11 3/4 inch tall, not 12 inches tall. So that's why I have a 1/2 inch space at the bottom of the tile, and if I did it correctly and I should have measured, I wouldn't have had to cut such a hard, difficult tile to cut. So just think about that next time, everyone, because hopefully you're not having to do what I had to do right here. Now this is where a tile saw comes in real handy because you're able to make these long, even cuts along both sides, as well as a plunge cut with this tile saw. And I would never be able to cut this piece and have it stay in one fluid piece if I didn't have the ability to do a plunge cut, as you can see right there. Now in the trades, you call this piece a butt pucker because your butt is puckering, hoping that this piece does not break in your hands, as you can tell from my reaction.
Woo! It fit. It actually fit.
I feel my reaction probably speaks for itself, and therefore we can just move on and just to say Brent was happy that that one did not break in my hands. I shim it up evenly and consistently, especially with all the loose trim that I have right there, and making sure that it's perfectly level and positioned correctly before I move on to the next piece. As a side note, I would normally have a piece of angle trim placed right here, just like I did on the other side, but because I have a very close door jamb, I decided to leave it out and just have the tile butt up against the wood door trim, which worked out quite perfectly. Now anytime I put some type of accent trim up, I generally want to let that set overnight prior to installing any type of other large tile panels above it, just because I don't want it to move if there's too much weight bearing down on it. Just something to think about, especially if you're doing a tile project like this. Now for the small thin strips at the top, just another reason why you want a wet saw tile cutter, because you can rip very long, nice, even thin strips with your tile saw. And as I noted before, a little strip of blue painter's tape always comes in handy. Now one installation aspect that I did not capture in the first two walls that I installed is how I actually shim up the tiles. So let me explain it to you.
So before you put any boards on, I suggest leveling out your surface first. And what I do is actually, since I already have this area leveled out and flush, I then put a shim here. I created a shim over here and over here, which accounts for this level being perfectly level. Now all I literally used was a LaCroix box and used some cardboard from that, as well as a bit of tape, just to give me just a hair more thickness to make sure that this level is perfectly level. So fun, easy way to get this area fully level before you even install any tile whatsoever. Let's see how it works.
Hopefully that made sense to everyone, and if it didn't, please let me know in the comment section below. I always try and answer as many comments as humanly possible. I'm only one man. For this first piece, I have to cut around the tub spout as well as the mixer, so I'm incorporating and transferring the dimensions that I have there onto the tile. Then I can drill the tub spout hole with my diamond saw hole cutter and use my tile saw for the mixer. Now, when using a diamond hole saw, there's generally a couple steps you want to take. One, you want to start at a high rate of speed as well as come in at an angle. You don't want to come straight down on it because it's going to start skipping on you. So try and come down at an angle, then you can lay it flat once you have an even circle around. You also want to make sure you're adding water occasionally because the water is going to allow your bit to bite in better as well as allow the saw to last longer. Now I cut small grooves in the top of the tile in order to fit the mixer. Now I use my tabletop wet saw to cut this one, but you don't have to. It just makes it a little bit easier than my other saw. Now before fitting a very complicated piece like this, I always suggest actually dry fitting it first just to make sure that it fits properly. It's not fun to remove a piece when it's fully mudded on the backside, as you can imagine. Now the two trowels that I use the most when tiling is your standard 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch trowel as well as a notched margin trowel. Now the notched margin trowel is just a nice tool that makes it very easy to get into small tight knit areas as well as just scooping up copious amounts of mortar and thinset and place it on your tile for back buttering purposes. Back butter. For some reason that just sounds enticing and inviting. Well, I'm talking about, so I might as well explain it if you don't know. So I'm placing the mortar directly onto the back side of the tile. I can either do this or apply the thinset to the wall itself and then place the tile on top of it. Now those are the normal two preferences when applying the thinset. And when I apply thinset to the back side of a tile, it's normally because it's a very large tile and it's easier to apply that way versus spreading it all across the wall. If I'm installing a number of smaller tiles like subway tiles, I would most likely apply the thinset to the wall first and then install the tile just because it's a quicker way to install multiple tiles at once. Now the other spacer that I'm using quite often on this project is these cute little wedge spacers. Now these things are perfect especially when you want to be very precise because they're tapered from one end to the other, so you can be very accurate when you want to space accordingly. Now I would use your standard spacer on smaller tile, but for these large pieces when you want to be very precise and accurate, I use my cute little wedge tiles. Now once your thinset dries overnight, I just take a hammer and give my Level Max spacers just a nice little tap. Now it comes time for cleanup, and if you did your proper precaution on protecting the surface, the tub should be just fine and easy to clean because all you have to do is remove the tape, right? You did put tape down, right? Now once you clean the surface and get ready for grout, prior to actually applying the grout, I actually tape off all the corners on the bottom as well as on the sides because that's the most water intrusive area, and we're going to be applying a silicone that matches the grout color, which is perfect because one, it's extremely waterproof, and two, it matches our beautiful grout lines I'll be applying shortly. Now I apply a heavy bead of silicone to all corners with tape, then press it in with my finger and smooth it out with my finger, and then remove the tape after that. Now the reason why I apply tape first is because I want a perfect seam all the way across the tub. I hate seeing a very messy caulk line, and the fact that you apply tape first makes it very easy to have a nice crisp edge all the way across, especially with the fact that this silicone is very high quality, high density, so it tends to stick to everything. Now as you can see from this shot, it's such a nice clean, smooth finish that you don't have to do anything to the caulk line once you remove the tape. Just another little tip and makes life a little bit easier. Now I also want to preface the fact that you want to silicone the bottom edge of your shower box because that's one area you don't want to have to worry about later on with water intrusion. Now we're taking out all of these fixtures in this bathroom and replacing it with new ones that have an oil rubs bronze finish to it, so we need to remove all the chrome versions. Now the tub drain is actually chrome as well, so I have to remove that with this nice little handy tool that I would just dub tub drain spout remover wrench, right? Sounds appropriate. It's a nifty little tool. It just has these very unique prongs that dig into the drain, and you're easily able to remove the old drain with this tool. So definitely highly suggest getting if you need to remove a tub drain. Now comes time for the real fun grouting portion of this project, and we are using polyblend non-sanded grout. Now they have sanded and non-sanded grout, but I generally use non-sanded if I'm working with small grout lines. The non-sanded stuff you can only use up to 1/8 of an inch grout line, which we have on this project. Now, the reason why I'm using non-sanded versus sanded is because I find that you make less of a mess with non-sanded grout. The grout stays on the wall much easier, much better, and it doesn't fall down, and it's very easy to apply non-sanded because it's so smooth. Of course, if you have larger grout lines than 1/8 of an inch, I would highly suggest using a sanded grout because it will fill in those cracks much better than a non-sanded. Now I'm using a standard grout float to push the grout into the grout lines and holes and every which way you could possibly imagine. I just want to push as much grout into those lines as humanly possible, because the more you get in there, the stronger the grout line is going to be, and there's going to be less chance of water intrusion. Now with this grout, and if you're quick, you can work in very large spaces. You can probably grout this one whole side and then come back with a sponge if you'd like. Now I would suggest having 2 large 5-gallon buckets to the side filled up with water. One of the buckets will be your main dirty sponge bucket where you're taking off a lot of the excess on the wall and therefore removing a lot of the grout. The second would be your more finished side where you're coming in at the very end and cleaning up all the film that the grout leaves behind afterwards. Now as for the shower fixtures, there are plenty of options out there. We are using a Pfister fixture. I actually did have to look up whether it's pronounced Pfister or P-Fister, but I don't know, P-Fister just kind of sounds a little dirty, right? Or in all honesty, thinking about it, I guess Pfister also sounds dirty too. But in any case, that's the name of the company and we're going with it. It's a beautiful product. It's very sturdy, it feels good in the hand, and that's all you really want, especially in a fixture, is that it feels like a high quality fixture. As for the tub spout, I remove the cap and leave the galvanized pipe in place. I then take some plumber's tape and tape off all the threads just to make sure we have a perfect seal. Once that is complete, all you have to do is thread the tub spout into position, and you can silicone the edge if you want, but you don't have to. As for the shower head, I remove the galvanized pipe, then install the shower arm, and then apply some seal tape and the head itself. Now I strongly suggest only hand tightening it or using a wrench very carefully, because at the end of the video you'll see a very entertaining outtake if you tighten too much. Last item of precaution is always applying some type of high quality sealer to the tile as well as the grout. Just makes it a nice, clean, even finish, and a little bit more protection is always preferred. And once that's complete, you can sit back and relax due to the fact that you are done. Now the bathroom is one of the most expensive rooms of the entire house to remodel and finish for a reason, because there's a lot of time and energy dedicated to doing it properly, as you can see from all the steps. But in the end, you have one incredible transformation and one project that I am proud to say you are one beautiful, sexy beast. Now, let's try it out. Make sure it all works. It always feels good when it works the first time. Ooh, feels good to be done. Let's take a shower. Maybe even a bath. Why not? And there you have it, episode number 57 of BYOT completed. There was quite a few steps in this project along the way, and I love the transformation, so hopefully you guys all enjoyed it as well. Please like the video, please subscribe to this channel, and please check out my Instagram feed and my newly developed website at BYOTools.me. You can learn how to support the channel from there. Also, let me know what you think of the new background. I've had the old one since literally BYOT number 1, which has been over 3 years now, and I felt like it needed a change. So please let me know what you think in the comments below. In any case, have a good time, and catch you next time. Yeah, you know when I mentioned be careful with a wrench with the shower head? Yeah, they don't make them like they used to sometimes. Or maybe I was just a little too aggressive with the wrench.